Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say how nice it is to see my former colleague from the House, Jim Matheson. Great to see you. And thank you for holding this hearing today. And Ranking Member Capito, thank you for doing this as well. One area that I hope to find agreement on this subject is unleashing nuclear energy in America. And so my first question is for Mr. Mabus. In your testimony, you advocate for prohibiting oil and gas imports from Russia as a means to cut off Russian revenues. And isn't the same true restricting Russian uranium, which also provides direct revenues to the Russian government?
I think cutting off all Russian energy revenues is incredibly important. And coming from the Navy, where we have used nuclear for propulsion from the mid-50s till today safely with no accidents. I do think that nuclear, particularly some of the new technologies of small modular reactors, need to be a part of the mix.
Thank you. And I would note the last questioner mentioned how incentives were needed, tax incentives. I would argue that regulatory relief is the more important place to look, especially when it comes to rare earth minerals and uranium. These are the products that are held up and stymied in the United States, including in my home state of Wyoming, because it's the regulatory burden and the length of time and the cost to get through all those regulatory hurdles that snuffs out the financial capability and wherewithal for these companies to move forward and develop these rare earth minerals and uranium in the United States. So let's address the regulatory side of it as well. Ms. Sagama, my colleague here from North Dakota and I both sit on the banking committee. We're aware that the Federal Reserve nominee that was rejected on a bipartisan basis was advocating limiting credit access to energy companies, and her writings were genuinely hostile to the energy industry. So in light of the fact that this became an issue that ultimately caused her to not be accepted, do you think it's appropriate for the SEC to be issuing a climate proposal?
SEC simply doesn't have the authority to regulate climate change. I mean, Congress hasn't even passed a law. Why should an agency just assume that regulatory power?
And, you know, we'll note that ESG, as BlackRock has asserted, because of its market power, its ESG portfolio demands are really driving the market in that direction anyway. Government doesn't need to do that. Again, Ms. Sagama, could you expand on the greenhouse gas reduction efforts and outcomes by the oil and gas industry that you detail in testimony?
Well, I'd like to highlight the fact that in the electricity sector, fuel switching to natural gas has reduced more greenhouse gas emissions than wind and solar combined. We've reduced about 3.5 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2.1 billion by renewables. And we did that without incentives. We did that without subsidies. We did that through market investment, from private sector investment, and just increased use of natural gas, or increased production of natural gas.
Natural gas, especially in this country, is so incredibly clean that I'm actually surprised that climate advocates don't highlight the benefits of natural gas in their agendas. Because climate change is climate-based and globally based, I would argue that the cost and benefits associated with helping countries like India with their greenhouse gas emissions by helping them switch to natural gas or LNG would globally be enormous. So much bigger than what we could produce here in the United States in terms of greenhouse gas reductions. My gosh, helping India do the same thing with the same amount of money that takes us to get little tiny incremental benefits. If we would help them with that amount of money, we could have huge incremental benefits for the global climate. Excuse me. My time has run out. I yield back.